Give me just one moment. All right. Welcome everybody to Building Bridges Sunday night games and action. Tonight we're going to have a town hall with Mario DeSantis, who is running for the U.S. House, New Jersey District 1. But first, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about Building Bridges, who we are, what we do, and then we'll jump right into things. So give me just a moment here. Oh, that is the right thing. Okay. Whoop. Here we are. Okay, sorry about that, you guys. Okay, here we are. I apologize for that technical difficulty. So Building Bridges, we are a nationwide organization that came to be after Pete Buttigieg dropped out of the 2020 presidential race, and he got all of his organizers and volunteers and everyone who supported him. He asked them to get behind all the down ballot candidates and Joe Biden, and Building Bridges was formed. Building Bridges has a mission, a vision, and values. Our mission is that we're guided by the principles of servant leadership, and Building Bridges mobilizes and empowers networks of relational grassroots organizers equipped to support campaigns and causes based in progressive values. And our values are that we recognize that the effort adds value regardless of the result, and we are committed to the development of a broad and inclusive coalition. We conduct our actions and are informed by the legacy of Pete Buttigieg's 2020 campaign rules of the road. And our vision is a just and equitable democracy that is safeguarded by an informed and engaged electorate where everyone is valued and belongs. Everything that Building Bridges does, we do through these lenses. We strive to inform and engage ourselves in the work of delivering racial equity, bridging the rural and urban communities, reforming our democracy, and creating a sense of belonging. Building Bridges has all of these different programs and events that we have, and our days of action. Building Bridges, we have partnered with Roadmap to Progress this election season to support all of our endorsed candidates at our days of action through postcards, text banking, and phone banking. Thanks so much for being here at our Games for Change event. We're gonna have a town hall with Mario, and then we're gonna play a little bit of Jeopardy afterwards. It's gonna be a lot of fun. And then over on the right of the screen, you see that we also have lights, camera, action, and we watch a movie and we write postcards for our endorsed candidates. And this Wednesday, we're watching 42. It's gonna be a really good time. And then we have our courses and our trainings. These are free hour-long sessions and workshops to take you from your first steps into volunteering and organizing. Our experienced volunteers, they design and present these sessions every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. And you can download a free workbook to go with all of these. And there are 11 different ones. I will post a link for that in just a few moments. And then we have our virtual book club. I'm so excited. This is coming back tomorrow. We kick it off at 8:30 p.m. And we are reading The Sum of Us, What Racism Costs Everyone, and How We Can Prosper Together. And we're going to meet for 5 weeks every Monday, and we're going to discuss the books. We're going to have some really awesome guest speakers that come, and it's just going to be a really good time. So you can sign up for that. And then once a month, we have Team Up for Building Bridges. It is the first Sunday of every month at 7 p.m. and it leads into this event that we're at. And it's basically just a get to know us session. It's a lot of fun. And then over on the right of the screen, we have Demapalooza that is back. We sit and listen to music for an hour, or we have a live musical guest, and we gather to write letters to our senators about upcoming bills. It's a really great event. And then, of course, you can follow us on social media at buildbridgesforamerica.com on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And then, of course, you can check out our website at buildingbridgesforamerica.com. And I'll give you the links to all of that information here in just a moment. So tonight we are lucky enough to have Mario DeSantis, who is joining us. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Mario, and then we're going to give him the floor. So Mario is an educator that has not yet left the classroom in 3 decades. And as we emerge from this pandemic, he views this as an opportunity to do better. And he wants a world that can protect the planet for the sake of our children. One that does not one that guarantees universal health care, and one that understands that education is a basic human right. Ladies and gentlemen, Mario.
Yeah, thank you to Nessa. Thank you to Melissa. Thank you to the whole Building Bridges team. I really want to express my appreciation because you are one of the first organizations that threw your support behind me. And that's always a risk. Organizations want to see what other organizations are doing before doing so. So I really am so happy to be supported by such a great team. I want to start off with my story and tell you what led me to activism. So I was born in a pretty conservative environment. I was born in southern New Jersey. I was born in Buena, New Jersey. This was the town where they wanted to film an episode of The Simple Life. And that was the show with Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie, where the rich got to see what it was like to be poor. And this was the same town where after Trump was elected into office, we had a parade of trucks with Confederate flags that drove to our local high school. So imagining this kind of environment, I'm sure you can imagine what it was like for me as an openly gay student. My mom is a retired medic, and I would bring her medicine to school with me in my pocket. It was called syrup of ipecac, and it would induce vomiting. So if the bullying got really bad for me that day, I would go into the bathroom and I would take that so I could leave for the day. So it was these experiences that made me feel vulnerable. But despite that, school was a safe place for me because my teachers took me under their wings and they made sure that they protected me. And I wanted to play that role for students as well. So that's what compelled me to become a teacher. And I promised that I would be the very first one to speak up if I saw something or someone that needed help. So why did I enter this race? In 2016, when Trump was elected, we kept saying resist, resist, because we didn't want to normalize any of the things that he was trying to accomplish. But now with him gone, thank God he's gone, but that doesn't mean we still don't have work to do. Because the reality is we've normalized a healthcare system that has people selling off their assets just to afford their care. We've normalized an electoral finance system that allows the voices of the wealthy to drown out the voices of the most marginalized. We've normalized letting corporate industries sabotage our chances at a healthy future. We've normalized a lifetime of student loan debt. And we've normalized an overall economic system that leaves us exhausted. Now, I chose to challenge Donald Norcross because on issue after issue, he undermines our progress. He voted for the Keystone Pipeline that was against President Obama. He was one of the only House Democrats to do so. This energy was described as the most destructive energy on the planet by the National Geographic. He was one of the only House leadership members not supporting a universal healthcare system. Now, during a global health emergency, I think that all of our representatives should be leading that fight. He touts a local incinerator, which is the second largest polluter of lead in the entire country. And of course, it's in one of our majority colored communities while he takes their campaign contributions. He voted to lift financial regulations that were protecting Black borrowers. And he'll tout his advocacy for workers. But the reality is that wages over the past decade have risen by 27%. Healthcare premiums rose by 55%. Deductibles rose by 111%. So you cannot be pro-worker if you are not also calling for a universal healthcare system, because all of their wages are going towards those rising healthcare costs. Now, nurses over the pandemic, they were treated horribly by hospital systems. They were asked to make their own masks in the cases where hospitals couldn't provide them. Hospital systems weren't staffing their units in a safe manner. So what did they do? They left the hospital system to work for a third-party company, only to be rehired by that same hospital system. And they were earning so much more money. That's what a worker should do. That's what we're seeing across all sectors. But he was one of the members that wrote into our COVID coordinator, asking them to investigate those rising prices. But he's not one of the legislators, or he's not one of the representatives who signed on to the legislation that would guarantee safe nurse staff or nurse patient ratios. So I believe this specific moment is a really delicate opportunity for us. It's a time where we can reset. We just witnessed almost the loss of 1 million Americans. And I think we can't take this moment in vain. As we emerge from the tragedies of the pandemic, like you said, it's an opportunity for us to put out the vision of the world that we want to live in. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to expand on these ideas.
Thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. So our first question is going to come from Susan. And she said, are you prepared to take up real reform for Social Security and Medicare while grandfathering those who are at or near retirement age?
Absolutely. Just because we have rises in Social Security at the same time that we're having rising Medicare contributions doesn't mean that we actually have realized any kind of economic relief. The reality is, as those Medicare contributions go up, they're taking more out of Social Security fixed income benefits. But a Medicare for all, a universal healthcare system would also make sure that we're expanding those benefits so that we don't have to pay for those supplemental plans. It would include dental, it would include hearing, it would include long-term services. And some of the patients that I've had the pleasure of meeting, their stories are tragic. Medicare does not cover long-term healthcare services. So oftentimes I met a patient who had to sell off his assets so that he would go into poverty and qualify for Medicaid, which did cover long-term services. And most often, these responsibilities are falling on our female caretakers. My mom, she had to retire early so that she could take care of my aunt because she wasn't afforded the long-term services. Same thing for my grandmother. After my aunt passed, she moved down to Florida to take care of my grandmother. So protecting those benefits is an absolute must, but making sure that other contributions don't eat into those benefits is an equal priority.
Thank you so much for that, Mario.
Absolutely.
Melissa wants to know, can you tell everyone a bit about the crazy ballots in New Jersey?
Ooh, absolutely. All right. So we think that election rigging is just for Republicans, but I will tell you that that is a myth. And here's the tea. So we do the same thing in New Jersey, but we don't do it as obviously. It's a tacit way that we undermine our elections. So in New Jersey, we have something called the ballot line, and it is the only state in the country that has this system. So each year you'll have the list of offices that are up for election. And this year, the highest office is the office for which I'm running, the House of Representatives. So under this column, we'll have the House of Representatives, we'll have the mayor or two county commissioners. They were formerly freeholders. Then we'll have anybody running for mayor, and then the councilors. And I think those are the lowest offices up for election this primary season. Now, New Jersey organizes it in such a way that psychologically compels you to vote right down that line because they're all Democratic candidates. Now, in other states, it's just here's the office, here are the names from which you can choose. But they set it up in a way that quantitative research has proven gives a 35% advantage to those candidates. And these are the party-backed candidates, and they know that if they step out of line with what that mainstream democratic infrastructure believes in or what their agenda is, then they're at risk for being thrown off of that line. And automatically, if you don't have the line advantage, you lose that 35% advantage. So myself as an outsider, do you think I'm welcome into this process? Do you think I'm going to be awarded that line? I think we all know the answer is no. Now, there are some things that we can do to increase our chances, to increase our organization. And that requires that we bracket with at least 2 county commissioner candidates. And we're doing that because we want to make sure that we increase or maximize our chances. But here's the thing. We've had elections in the past where candidates wanted to take advantage of that. And they would give all of the required paperwork to the county commissioner or the office of elections, the county office of elections. And it's required that you submit a letter and an affidavit saying that you do want to bracket with these 2 other candidates. But we have races where they were like, oops, we didn't get this. And then those candidates would, take their grievance to the court. But by the time they went through that legislative process, the primary had already happened and the harm has already been done. So there is currently a lawsuit for candidates in the past who have realized damages. We'll see where that goes. I mean, it's an obviously blatant attempt at undermining democracy.
Wow, thank you for that education on that.
Absolutely.
Great question, Melissa. Okay, questions are really starting to roll into the chat room. Kaz wants to know, when you're listening to your voters, what is the most common feelings and issues that they express, and how can you make a difference for them?
Yeah, well, I hate to harp on the healthcare issue, but that is an issue that is eating at the lives of every single American. And it's not just that it sits in this realm of health, it is bleeding into other sectors of our economy. And I'll give you examples. So as healthcare premiums are rising, employers are having to choose between giving their employees raises or paying for these rising healthcare costs. It's bleeding into our local school systems. With rising healthcare costs, there's less money for education because we're paying for teachers' insurance premiums. We're paying for municipal workers' healthcare premiums. And recently this year, my opponent, his family owns an insurance brokerage, and they sell their services to our school systems. There are 84 school districts in our state that belong to this insurance brokerage. They were at the center of a New Jersey comptroller audit this year that found that they overcharged one of our school districts by $2.1 million. And that's depleting our resources. I think you could talk to any educator in this country right now, and they would tell you that, school funding is a big issue. And I'm so sorry, I believe I misspoke. It's $1.6 million that they overcharged the school district by, and that was Pennsauken schools, if anyone is interested in that.
Wow, that's a big number.
Yeah. I think another obvious concern that voters have are how extreme the right has become, and I think what I like to point out to them, and maybe not just to those who express those concerns, but also to those within our own party, is that we are seeing how effective and how organized they are at coalescing over issues that are non-issues to begin with. Critical race theory. That one issue has compelled them for over a year to sustain discourse on this topic. And it compelled candidates on every level to run for office. It compelled people to show up to school board meetings. Who shows up to school board meetings? Now, that's scary to me because we should equally have that passion towards issues that are so morally obvious. But I'm experiencing some resistance within our own party. But obviously, it's from those who have some financial stake in the industries that I'm trying to challenge right now.
All right, thank you for that so much. So Teresa has a question on women's issues. What are your goals for women between the ages of 40 and 70 that have nothing to do with healthcare, children, or small business loans? Most women between this age do not have a college degree or are not financially independent while knowing that they will live longer.
Yes, let me just review this question. This is a sad reality that we face, because I know the women in my life have struggled with this issue. I've heard from a family member who was in an unhealthy relationship that it was just easier to stay in that relationship because she couldn't afford to live outside of that relationship. Now, how can we rectify a system like that where it's easier financially to stay in an unhealthy relationship? We have to make sure that we're opening up the avenues that would allow for financial freedom. And I know you said that has nothing to do with healthcare, but a lot of time, if you divorce your spouse, what happens? You lose access to their healthcare. So we've got to make sure that healthcare has nothing to do with being married. It has nothing to do with losing a job. We also have to make sure that we're enforcing equitable wages between males and females. You know, a lot of times we'll see where the female is doing the same exact job, maybe even by the same exact company, but paid far less than a male employee doing the same exact work.
All right. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Great question, Teresa. So Christy has a comment on inclusion. So the AAPI community, or excuse me, her AAPI friend says that she feels that her community is not being addressed. And when she asked the local DNC about outreach to the AAPI community, she was told that wasn't in their plans. The AAPI population is the fastest demographic, and the GIP is doing a better job at research. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think that we should avoid or exclude any coalition of people. And for the GOP to do a better job of outreach, that kind of is embarrassing for our own party. Now, I know Christy had mentioned her friend is Korean. Is that right?
Yes, Sandy is Korean.
Yeah.
And you know, most of Cherry Hill has a huge
right.
Korean population.
That's right.
And it is one of the biggest growing ones. And I just wanted to say that it's kind of almost a mirror situation of Northern Virginia and in the outskirts of Atlanta, where the Korean population is quite large. And we're overrepresented in the GOP party because we actually get flyers and radio ads and direct targeting advertisement towards our community. We're Koreans and Chinese and Indian Americans make up the wealthiest part of the demographics in Northern Virginia. We are the biggest donators to the GOP as a demographic because we have so much money. And it bothers me that such a obvious demographic is being ignored because I can tell you firsthand, flyers and advertising is not directed to us by the Democratic Party. And I know people say that it doesn't matter that we all speak English, but it does matter because that means that we don't count, that we are not included in whatever you guys are thinking of for the party. And my friend here right across the table, he went to Georgia to do door-to-door knocking for the senators. And he was overwhelmed at how much advertising the Republicans were doing to us. And in Arlington and in Marlton, where she is,
Sure.
we are not being spoken to. And it's a real problem.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we can accurately understand the concerns of a community if we're not actually outreaching and hearing what their stories are, hearing what their concerns are. And like I said, that's embarrassing that that outreach would have been better accomplished by the Republican Party. In my experience, when I'm reaching out to voters, I have not looked by certain specific demographics. Rather, I have been spending a lot of time because of the concerns that we have financially. What are our limitations? So, I mean, I go into a community and I knock on a door, and unfortunately, whoever is there is there. And unfortunately, again, it's the most densely populated areas. My friend, during the uprise and the amount of Asian hate that we were seeing, she's Korean. I felt so much concern for her. She was afraid to go out and get lunch. She was afraid to go on her lunch break. She was afraid for her elderly family members. And if we're not hearing these stories, then we're not coming up with solutions to help them feel safe. That's a value that I have. And if I were given the opportunity to represent the district, I would make sure that I bring in a really diverse coalition to hear their stories and reflect their concerns.
I will let her know, and she is writing postcards for you. So
yeah,
she said that if we start texting, she will do that too. So yeah. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate her contribution. Thank you very much.
That was a great question, Christy. Thank you for that. All right. So I am an angel mom. I lost a child to opiate overdose 5 years ago. And so my question is about opiates. 41% of adults reported struggling with mental health or substance abuse. Last year in New Jersey, 3,200 people lost their lives to an overdose, which would be the most since New Jersey started tracking it in 2012. Now, President Biden has set aside $2.5 billion for mental health and drug addiction, and that it really is a great first step, but it's not enough. So what, if any, legislation would you put forth to combat the opiate epidemic if you are elected to that?
I'm so sorry for that experience. And I want to tell you, it's an experience that I know myself personally too. My brother is recovering from opioid use disorder. I remember the nights where my mom would get random calls in the middle of the night. I remember the weeks that would go by where we didn't know where my brother was. My mom depleted her life savings to pay for treatment for my brother. That's right. So we also have to have the imagination, not just to try to rectify this issue with treatment and therapy. That's a prerequisite. That is a must. That is the most basic surface level thing. But we also have to ask what leads people towards this despair. And oftentimes these issues are called either deaths of despair or just despair in general. And a lot of times it's the result of economic instability, not having the basic resources just for the chance to live. So I believe that there's a minimum economic investment that we have to make sure that we guarantee for our people. We need to make sure that their wages are enough, not to leave them stressed out all of the time, which facilitates a lot of this despair. So obviously funding for our local health centers, obviously a massive overhaul of the healthcare system, but also economic investment, making sure people that their life just doesn't consist of going to work, coming home, paying the bills, just a constant life cycle of stress. And again, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. And thank you so much for that answer. Does anybody have any other questions for Mario? I do have another question for you. Assuming you win, choose one single issue that you would prioritize coming into term and describe what you would want to accomplish.
Sure. Well, I'm sure you all had an idea in your mind because I talk about it so often, but there's a prerequisite. No matter what our priority issue is, we will not make progress until we get money out of politics, because the influence that the corporations have is unimaginable. Over the summer, there was a leaked audio from an ExxonMobil lobbyist. He thought he was being interviewed. He thought he was being scouted for this, career advancement. But no, it was an undercover call where he admitted that ExxonMobil would target centrist and conservative Democrats to do their bidding. So what were those Democrats doing? They were voting against climate legislation. And all of this lobbying is legal. And it happens in every single issue, every single sector of our economy. So no matter what kind of progress we want to make, money must be out of the political process, because it's really suppressing the voices of our most oppressed communities. It's stopping our progress. And to do that, this became uncontrollable with Citizens United, the Supreme Court decision. And to overcome this, I support a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. We're going to
Absolutely.
it looks like Wes has a question. Sorry about that.
You all good, and you might have answered it. I jumped in late, but I'm a teacher as well. And
hi, Wes.
So, hello. So my question is, what barriers have you faced as an educator deciding to run for office, and what advantages have you had?
Sure. So if you don't mind, I want to talk about what problems I'm having as a candidate running for office as an educator. And then I'll address that specific question, because there's a whole nother layer to this story. So as educators, we're often told that we should help students manage with the challenges that they face. The ACEs study, I'm sure that you've heard about this, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. Now, we always have our professional development sessions where we're told that these adverse childhood experiences, things like poverty, sexual abuse, homelessness, food insecurity, lack of health insurance, everything contributes to undermining a student's ability to learn. And when we have these sessions, I'm like, so my mind jumps immediately to, I don't want to help students cope with that. I want to rectify those issues, because if it's undermining the whole education process, then our profession is undermined. Childhood poverty just jumped up by 41% because we failed to, keep up with the child tax credits. Do we not believe that that's going to undermine a student's ability to learn? Of course it does. So that's a big challenge that I'm experiencing, that our own profession isn't really understanding how the economic challenges outside of our classroom are undermining our ability to teach. So what have I faced as an educator? And the advantages. Oftentimes we're told not to talk about politics, but a lot of these issues, whether we want for better education funding, whether we want for school repairs, that is policy. So, I might get the side eye from an administrator, but I'm doing the right thing and it doesn't matter. The advantages that I've had, I can't tell you how many students tell me how energized they are by this process. So I'm so happy. You know what? Whatever the result is from this election, I'm so happy to know that I've inspired the students that have been helping us on this campaign. And I know that they'll pick up that work and continue it after June 7th.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Great question, Wes, and thank you so much for that, Mario. Okay, so we are wrapped up with the Q&A portion, and we are gonna jump in and we're gonna write some postcards for Mario. And while we're writing postcards for Mario, we're gonna play a little bit of Jeopardy. So yay, I see DJ over there has her postcards ready to go. That's so awesome.